Hey mamas, welcome to Breastfeeding Relief with Bethany. We share incredible stories, tips, and breastfeeding ideas to help on your journey. I'm your host, Bethany Laverne, a lactation consultant and speech therapist who helps mamas with breastfeeding. Not all breastfeeding stories are the same, and we dive into those topics. Hi, Caitlin. Welcome to Breastfeeding Relief with Bethany. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and how many kiddos you have?
So my name is Katie. I live in Chicago. I'm Canadian, and I have two sweet babies. One is Liam, and he's 2.5 years old, and then I have 10-month-old Maddie.
Awesome. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about how your breastfeeding journey went?
Honestly, they were completely different, and I think this just goes to speak about how every baby is their own personality. Like my son was refluxy, but he was also a hippo, and so he just fed through his reflux like a champion, and he fed all the time, and we had a really beautiful nursing journey. And then my daughter, it was so hard. Even though it was my second time around, it was just way harder than with my first. And we actually got her diagnosed with a lip and a tongue tie when she was like 8 months old. But those first 6 months, I tried so hard to go through to nurse her. I wanted to nurse her the same way I nursed my son. And around, 6 weeks, it was really obvious. It wasn't happening. And it wasn't a supply thing. It's just, she was getting really frustrated at the breast. And so we started bottle feeding, and we did like a supplementary bottle feeding while still trying to nurse and then trying to pump. And then eventually we weaned her over to bottles completely. So just like two totally different nursing journeys.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you ever go see a lactation consultant when you started to get frustrated that she wasn't latching?
I did. And actually we got a low weight gain flag. And so I saw several lactation consultants trying to figure out what's going on, because we knew it wasn't a supply thing.
Mm-hmm.
Plenty of milk. It was very much felt like a fire hydrant. I was spraying milk everywhere. So it wasn't, it wasn't that I didn't have enough milk for her. So we really couldn't figure out what's going on. And, we never really did get any answer as to why until we saw a speech pathologist at 8 months. And at that point, the speech pathologist was like, this baby definitely has a tongue and lip tie. I can see that she has a heart-shaped tongue. She just definitely has a tongue tie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is so sad that you slipped through the cracks. I mean, this is my platform. This is my niche. I talk about tongue ties a lot. My own son had tongue ties, for those that don't know. And so, one of the biggest flags is low weight gain, or being in that 0 percentile. And as a speech therapist, I'm very honest about, even in grad school, we didn't talk a lot about doing oral mouth exams on babies, checking for those tongue ties. I'm pretty sure we learned about that one day. I've had to go back and do a ton of extra continuing education. And so it just saddens me that so many people in the field, pediatricians, pediatric dentists I've talked to, lactation consultants, speech language pathologists, we are barely taught, even though we're working in the mouth, we're working on the heads, the chest, the face, we are not being taught to do oral exams properly. And so welcome to my platform.
Thank you. And it's one of those things where even as a mom, I'm sitting there going I think it's got to be something around a lip and a tongue tie. And I flagged this in a couple of different avenues, being like, are we sure? And the answer was always, no, she's just an impatient feeder. No, she is, it's her reflux. And she did have reflux. And I actually think that her reflux was probably related to having a tongue tie, right? Because that is a symptom of a tongue tie, is babies have terrible reflux. And so, we went through this journey of really doing everything right from a breastfeeding perspective. And it was still pretty unsuccessful because she had this tongue tie that we were never able to kind of get to the bottom of. And ironically, then we saw a speech pathologist because even with her bottles, she would take the bottle and it would just spill all over her face, right? And it was at that point she was bigger, and you could actually see the heart. Then at that point, you could visibly, her mouth was large enough that you could be like, that baby has a tongue tie, that baby has a lip tie. But of course, by that point, she's 8 months old, right? My nursing journey was long over at that point because it had been so unsuccessful. And it's it's one of those things where it's really funny that she had a low weight gain flag because she was almost 10 pounds at birth. She's humongous, but she just never then put on any weight after that.
Sure. Yeah. And the good thing is nowadays in 2023, we have bottles we can give them. We have formula we can give them, right? That's amazing. However, one of the biggest issues I see with moms is we turn up the flow rate. Yeah. So we are not addressing the underlying problem. Instead, we are drowning them in milk, right? Yeah. So then they're spitting up. They're colicky. Their bellies hurt and they have a ton of gas. And so we aren't ever figuring out that underlying problem. Yes, we've addressed now the weight. I bet she was gaining plenty of weight. But like you said, the milk was going everywhere because I'm sorry to say we were drowning her in milk. We were giving it to her too fast.
No, totally. And I think she wasn't able to, in the same way she wasn't able to latch on my breast properly, she wasn't able to latch on the bottle. And so there was no seal. And so like, if you just think of how much milk was coming at her face, and I knew it was going everywhere, but I also knew that she was visibly hungry and at least some going in, right? So it's like this balance as a mom where you're like, I know I need to get food into you and I'm so desperate to get milk into you, but I also don't know, like I'm just gonna, wipe it up and on we go. And then we ended up doing a series of feeding exercises that came through the speech pathologist with, and suddenly, she was able to take, and now it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't, she's grown out of that because she's got the strength in her jaw, but we still haven't addressed the lip and the tongue tie. She still has tongue tie. So it's just been a really, you come out of the first one and obviously, sleep was our issue. And I really took on that world. And then now I've got that nailed down and I thought I was going to be ready for the second and it's just completely different again, of course.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Everyone has said both of their breastfeeding journeys have been different, right? Even someone came on with like 4 kids, right? All their journeys are different, right? You think, they're all my biological children. They're made up of the same DNA, both children, but yet they are all completely different.
So different. Everything you can see, like in my 2, you can just tell he was always a very attached baby. He needed to be able to see me at all times. And there are times when I'm like, I actually don't think she cares if I'm in the room. Like they're just they're totally different children. They have totally different needs. She needs a lot more like gentle cuddle time. He always needed a lot more activity. Like they're just completely different personalities and they're like, especially when it came to nursing, it could not have been 2 more different scenarios.
Yeah. And so, Caitlin, I do want to speak into you for a minute, right? Because I love you. I want the best for you. I want your journey to go great. And so, yes, we're past our breastfeeding journey, but also as a speech therapist, other things I want to bring up to mamas, I never want a mama to feel forced to get a tongue tie and a lip tie released, right? But I also want you to know what could be coming up in the years ahead in their toddler years. With our own son, he was a drooler because he couldn't hold in all the spit in his mouth and he would literally drool through like 3 to 5 shirts a day. He couldn't color because he had drool spots all over his page, right? So that's going to start affecting his schooling. As a speech therapist, I see a ton of kids with our problems. And usually when I go do an oral motor exam on their mouth now, they all have tongue ties. Right. Yeah. So those are your kids you're still seeing in junior high and high school. They can't say their R's, instead of rabbit, it's wabbit. Instead of I love you, it's I love you. It's real cute until about, high school.
Until you're a teenager.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're falling in love and some girls like, I don't love you either, And then, we even talk about like finding a partner, you make out with your partner, like you can't kiss them, like you can't French them because you can't stick your tongue out.
I never thought of that.
And so
that has never crossed my mind.
Yeah. Sorry, mom, if you have to think about that for your kid, but think about it for just a hot second.
I'm like, she will literally never, not an option, not until she's 45 and married. Will she be Frenching anybody? Thank you very much. Exactly. So sorry, we're talking about when she's older now, but even, I was just saying, it's one of those things where, again, you find so much differing information on the internet, right?
Sure.
Some places and some experts will tell you just leave it. Leave it, she'll grow out of it. It's something that we can deal with exercises. Others, go immediately to a release of sorts. Like, how do you know what's the best way forward? How can you tell, I guess, as a parent, what's the best step for you?
Right. So I always say, do what's best for your family, but it's always great to have one of those one-on-one consultations. And so I love to walk you through like what the process looks like, because we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so, I love a team approach. What you really need is a great team approach. You need the pediatric dentist, especially when they're younger. ENTs are more going to go to surgery. You're going to have to put your kid to sleep. They're going to have to go under anesthesia. They're going to have to get stitches, right? And so that's a lot more traumatizing for a child. Whereas if we can catch it younger, we can do it in a pediatric office with a laser, and they can come home with you the same day. There's no side effects. There's no anesthesia, right? I also say you always need to work with a chiropractor, because someone with a tongue tie has a ton of tension, because that is the tie, right, is actually literally running from your tongue all the way to your toes. It's called fascia is what it is. So if you look up the picture, it's actually really cool. And so, but all that tension is running all the way through their body. So if you work with a chiropractor or a body worker, they're going to help release that tension for your baby or child. And we see it a lot in babies with what's called torticollis. And so they're super tight, and they'll only nurse like maybe on your left breast or just on your right breast. And then I also say, see a lactation consultant, which you wouldn't need one anymore, or myself, also a speech therapist, to run you through those stretches that you've already kind of done for feeding to set your daughter up for success for eating with strength and mobility. But we need to continue to do those stretches because the tongue is going to be healing afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I think the hardest thing to do is going to be doing those stretches afterwards, right? Because your baby's going to cry, you're going to feel bad, and you're going to say, let's not do it. But if that tongue heals back together like it wants to, like a wound, it always wants to close back together, then we're going to have to do it again. And why did we do it in the first place?
Yeah.
Because then you're just going to continue to see everything that you saw before.
It's super. So our lactation consultant was actually within the same family or within the same practice as the speech pathologist. And both of them together have been really helpful in helping us navigate just our feeding journey since that she was diagnosed with this, with the lip and the tongue tie. And obviously not for nursing, but then for the feeding and for the exercises to do, for, looking at different methods of feeding her that have been really helpful in strengthening her jaw tone. Around, just making sure that she is then able to take a bottle without spilling it, or, take food into her mouth and actually push it to the back, which is something that when we first started solids, she would like sit with her tongue kind of here, and then food would just fall out the front. And so both our lactation consultant and the speech pathologist were super helpful in just getting us to learn that too.
That's amazing. Yeah, because, when you also think about, so here's the best example I have. So like when they get their tongue tie released, right, it looks like a diamond shaped. And so when we want it to close, we think about, we don't want your window to shut. We want your blinds to close. So we want to keep that triangle. And so it's like closing like curtains. But if the window closes instead, then your tongue and the wound just healed back on itself, just like it was before. Yeah.
I imagine though, then that's really frustrating because you have to do a second release if that closes.
Exactly.
Over that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And by that, they're obviously older too.
Sure. Yes, exactly. So, and especially in a breastfeeding journey, if you're still on your breastfeeding journey, one of the biggest things I noticed mamas saying, one of the biggest flags is it hurts to breastfeed again. Oh no, we need to go in. We need to get deeper stretches, right? We aren't stretching the tongue enough. And that's why I always like a week follow-up that your lactation consultant, the pediatric dentist is stretching them again, because, you know, we're okay with them crying once because we're just going to see them maybe for an hour. Whereas I don't have the baby 24/7. So that doesn't bother me as much to stretch the baby and let them cry. Of course, we aren't hurting your baby, but, you know, we want to make sure we're getting a good stretch in there so the tissues aren't connecting again.
How long do you do, just out of personal curiosity, how long do you do those stretches and that recovery for? Like, how long does that take?
Well, thank you for asking. So you can go grab the preview on my website. And so I actually have a tracker for you. And so you're supposed to do the stretches 1 week before the release. So your baby knows the stretches. So they're used to them being in your mouth. So hopefully they won't bite you. Sometimes we get a few finger bites. And then 4 weeks afterwards. And they recommend 4 to 6 times a day. So I say never let more than 6 hours go by without stretching your baby's tongue.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you thought we planned that.
We actually did it. So what is maybe one thing you can share with everyone that you wish you would have known about breastfeeding?
Okay, so this, I always say this is the same as baby sleep. I wish that I knew it wasn't easy. I wish that I had known that it wasn't that it wasn't going to be that thing that just came easily. You know, movies and other people's journey into motherhood, and they're like, and then I nursed, and it's like, that's where the story ends. You don't get to hear, and it was really hard, and I found it exhausting, and I had to drink 87 liters of water just to keep my supply at a place where my baby wasn't angry all the time. Like, and that applies to both, right? Because I figured it would be easy for my son. It was easier, but it wasn't this beautiful, simple path and then he latched on and everything was beautiful. And then, we got the hang of it and everything was wonderful and everything was great. And then she came along and again, it was completely different. So I just, babies, you assume they're going to sleep when they're born and they don't. And you assume they're going to feed when they're born and they don't.
So true.
Yeah. Real mom talk with Caitlin.
Yeah. And Bethany. We're here to real talk you. Welcome to my podcast. Real life. Why don't you tell everyone, what was your favorite breastfeeding product you used?
So I loved my breastfeeding pillow. I also tried several of them, and it was very much like, this one was too hard. This one was too big. This one didn't feel right fitting against my body.
Okay, Goldilocks.
The right breastfeeding pillow. And for me, that was the Mom Cozy. It's, it changes your life because I think you're holding this baby in this one position for so long every day that your wrist gets carpal tunnel, your body hurts, things are different. So when you find the right pillow that has the right support, it just makes all the difference in those early weeks.
I agree. It saves your back instead of like hunching over constantly. It saves your back so much.
And actually, like the lactation consultant, when she came for my daughter, and by this point I thought I was, this seasoned veteran, and she would come in and be like, bring your baby to the breast. Don't bring your breast to the baby. Bring your baby to the breast. Because it was I was constantly hunched over, right? And I think the pillow it helps you get your positioning proper.
Very true. So why don't you let all the mamas know how they can connect with you?
So I run Little Bean Sleep Co, and you can reach me on my website, which is littlebeansleepco.com, or you can reach me on Instagram, which is just Little Bean Sleep Co.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you loved this episode, it would mean so much if you would share it with another mama or post on social media and tag me. I want to personally thank you for wanting to help other mamas. You got this. I'm rooting for your breastfeeding journey.